raised beds and containers. They're great options when you don't have the space to do a traditional deep mulch garden. I had a contributor write in, said they needed a little room in their yard for their dog, and they put raised beds around the entire perimeter. We've also had a bunch of contributors on the Saturday episodes that all they did were containers. We had a friend from Jamaica, all she had was rocks, but she grew a lot of food for her family just out of containers. We had another friend down in Texas. Her container gardens were spectacular. Yes, I talk a lot about the deep mulch, but I've got a raised bed, and we've got a lot of containers up by the house. They're very handy when you're cooking to step right out and pinch some fresh herbs or lettuce. So there's a good reason to have all of these. Now, a couple things you want to keep in mind with your raised beds. First is cost. Now, you can go Rolls-Royce. There's all kinds of companies out there that make all kinds of really nifty raised beds. Or you can go like I did, get some free 2x4 junk lumber and just bang it together and make a frame. I do suggest you put some kind of wire mesh on the bottom. We got the voles, and that kept them from climbing up in there, and we had some pretty good sweet potatoes out of there this year. The next thing you want to keep in mind is how you're going to fill it. The amount of dirt that you put in there can be very substantial depending on how many raised beds you actually have. This one's sitting on the garden soil, and with that soil in contact, got plenty of life in there, so I'm treating this just like I would the garden. But if you're going to do a raised bed on a concrete surface where it's got a solid bottom with just some holes for drainage, then you got to look at it a little differently. You're going to have to treat it like a container. A lot of people put logs and whatnot in there in the bottom to help fill that up so they don't have to spend as much to put the soil in there. I'm not so sure that's a great idea. It's got that slow breakdown process of the logs in there that binds up nitrogen, not necessarily helping your plants out so much. But if you have your raised bed sitting on a solid surface, then you're going to need to treat that soil differently. You're not going to have that life in there to break down and make those nutrients plant available. So you're going to have to feed, just like in a container. Now in a container like we have here, all we have is holes in the bottom, and it's in contact with the soil, but I'm still treating it like it's a container. Not like the life in the soil is helping the plants out. Now this cattle feeder is only 3/4 full of soil, and I can barely move it. So you got to be careful. So anytime you have a container, you're going to need to feed those plants. I know you've heard me talk a lot about no fertilizer. That's talking about the deep mulch where we had the life in the soil. In your containers, a potting soil works really well. Your liquid fertilizers work really well. Those are plant available. And I wouldn't spend any money on slow release. That stuff will not break down. If your plants need fed, they need fed right now, not in a month from now. Rock dust, I think that'd be a waste of your money. There's a lot of liquid fertilizers that are just fine for containers. Now we do put a little mulch in the container. That does help retain the moisture. And that's another thing we want to talk about. Now the biggest drawback to either a raised bed or a container is you're going to have to keep them watered. A lot of people let their plants die is because they didn't water them enough. You want to have a saucer underneath. I do not recommend putting rocks at the bottom of your container. That just makes a compaction layer. You just want that soil down to where it can drain into the pan. And then like Mom said, use a finger test. Stick your finger down in that soil a little bit. If it's damp, you're good to go. If it's a little dry, add a little bit of water. But if you have holes in the bottom of the container and a nice saucer underneath it, you're probably not going to overwater it. Another really good benefit of having some things in a container, when it's this time of year, you can haul them in and out of the house. Let them get a little sun when it warms up, keep them in when it's cold. And that way you'll be ahead next year. I hope this was helpful. And until next time, remember, take care of yourself, take care of your family, and God bless you. Come on, let's plant.
Let's go plant garden.